I've been in the industry a good long while now, and it's recently occurred to me that I've never really told my story. The story of a disgruntled little laboratory rat, that would be me, somehow being recognized as an authority in phlebotomy by governments, manufacturers, agencies, organizations, associations around the world. And it's a great story. I'm not going to be in this capacity much longer, more about that later, but it's time to tell my story on how this all came to be. And it really was a perfect storm back in the 1990s that prompted all of this. 3 elements came together that made it not just possible but necessary for me to do something different and create something that wasn't there, that needed to be created. And those 3 elements, one was, of course, being burned out. I had worked in just about every department in the laboratory, and I have not found anything to bring me joy anymore. That had been about 20 years of kicking around the industry, and I don't know, the love was lost. I love the phlebotomy component of being a medical technologist, but I didn't know what to do with that. Management certainly wasn't what I was interested in. I didn't want to manage people. I didn't want to deal with compliance or proficiency testing. None of that. It just didn't appeal to me. The second element of the perfect storm was what was happening in the industry in the late 1990s, throughout the entire 90s really, and that was the decentralization of phlebotomy. CEOs and CFOs were looking at how to better utilize their phlebotomists, and they saw them as one-skilled employees who needed to be cross-trained to do other things. So they took phlebotomy as a laboratory responsibility and put it in the hands of non-laboratory professionals. And to them it looked so easy, it couldn't possibly require much training. It was just looked like as easy as falling off a log. You put a needle in and blood comes out, right? Or so it seemed. And so they didn't follow it up with education. And decentralized phlebotomy turned out to be a miserable failure. Patient satisfaction surveys plummeted, staff morale plummeted, sample quality plummeted. It was a horrendous mistake. And, there are some pockets of success, but by and large, it fails more often than it's succeeded. So that was going on. And the third element was I started getting phone calls from attorneys wanting me to review legal cases in which patients were permanently injured or disabled or had even died from poorly performed venipuncture procedures. And I thought, are you kidding me? A venipuncture? It was astounding to me how such a simple procedure could lead to such catastrophic consequences. And I looked at enough cases to know that there's a lot of common elements here in all these cases, and it was a lack of education. People were not being taught how to prevent nerve injuries, arterial lacerations, falls from losing consciousness during a blood draw or immediately afterwards, patient identification or sample labeling errors that led to transfusion-related deaths. So there was a need in the industry for standards-based education. So my wife comes to me and she says, you know what? You need to do something else with your job, with your profession, with your life. You're just miserable in what you do. Find something else. And she gave me permission to quit my full-time job, if that's what it took. Now, imagine a wife who says, quit your full-time job and find something that brings you joy, knowing full well that half the family's income is going to be gone, and with no prospect of it returning for a while. But that's Catherine. That's the wife I was blessed with. And with that permission, which is a profound act of love, guaranteed, with that permission though, we got to talking and we thought, we know exactly what's needed in the industry, and that is to be a standards-based, reliable organization for information on how blood procedures ought to be performed, and develop the kind of materials that people can and will use to prevent catastrophic injuries and increase sample quality. And also to elevate the status of the phlebotomy profession, because you go anywhere and they were like the neglected stepchildren of the laboratory. Everybody looked down on them, still do in some places. So there was the need that needed to be met. The first thing we did was create newsletters and start workshops. We did local nursing workshops, hands-on training, and expanded that into other neighboring states. Opened up the agenda to include more laboratory lectures and be more inclusive of laboratorians and nurses. We didn't make 1 red cent on it. We spent 3 years traveling around most of the Midwest and the East. Didn't make a dime, but you know what? That wasn't the point. We needed to learn what our customers needed. We needed to know our market. We needed to find out what their problems were. We wanted to serve them, but we needed to know more about what their problems were and what we could provide for them in terms of solutions. And that we certainly accomplished. Somewhere in there, we also needed to secure the phlebotomy.com domain. If you're going to be an authority in phlebotomy, you darn well better have the right domain. And we were crestfallen when we found that it was already taken. The website for phlebotomy.com was some kind of dark, gothic, cultish website for a heavy metal band in Israel called Phlebotomy. Go figure. So we were really disappointed. We really needed that domain, but it was taken. We weren't deterred. We still needed to do what we needed to do, and we're going to build it one way or the other. But about 3 months later, I went back to see what this website looked like. And I'll be dipped if they didn't let the domain expire. I don't know what happened to Phlebotomy, the heavy metal band, whether they fell apart or what, but the domain got abandoned, and we snatched it up, and it's been ours ever since. So Catherine and I also wrote a book called Phlebotomy for Nurses and Nursing Personnel. We just immersed ourselves in the subject. Started writing Phlebotomy Today back then as well. It became a newsletter, and then ultimately there was a companion newsletter. And here it is 22 years later, and I'm still writing Phlebotomy Today, although it is now in a blog form. We started the company originally as Ernst Associates in a little unused bedroom in the corner of the house, and then ultimately changed the name to the Center for Phlebotomy Education. After 4 years, we hired our first employee, and after 7 years, the company had grown to completely take over the whole first floor of our house, and we had 3 full-time employees coming in as early as 7 o'clock in the morning. And at that time, we decided it's time to kick this thing out of the house, and so we moved it into leased office space. We built our own phlebotomy school, ran that for about 5 years. There's not much in the industry we haven't done. But there is still a lot to do in all of the elements that we've created and all the avenues that we've gone down. There's still a lot of work left to be done. Fast forward now, 22 years later, I can tell you that it has taken me to places I never, ever would have gone otherwise. I've spoken in almost every state, most provinces in Canada, 9 other countries. I've seen some of the most beautiful places on earth. And I've met some of the most compassionate, dedicated healthcare professionals on the planet. And I think that's the crown jewel of this part of my profession, being able to serve the most dedicated, compassionate people in the industry. You are so profoundly dedicated to what you do and to patient care. To be able to serve you is an honor and a gift that I never saw coming, and how profoundly impactful it has been on my life. I never would ever have been able to do any of that as a disgruntled little lab rat. I hate to think what would have happened had I not had a wife whose husband's joy was more important than his paycheck. Am I blessed or what? No accident that we came together, really. Divinely providential. But the Center for Phlebotomy Education will transition over the next few years to new leadership, new ownership. And yes, I am handpicking my own predecessor. So rest assured that that individual will be well steeped in the standards and will deliver the same kind of accurate, authoritative information and impeccable customer service that you've come to expect from the Center for Phlebotomy Education. That's our legacy, and that will certainly be maintained. There's a little snow up here on the mountaintop, you know, and it's time to think about retiring and moving on, although I don't know why. Retiring is what people do when they don't want to do what they do anymore, and they hate their job or just tired of it. I'm not. I love what I do, absolutely love what I do, and ever since I left the bench on December 13th, 1998, I've not worked a day in my life. What a blessing to be able to say that. And that's what I want for you and everyone, to find something that brings you such joy that it does not seem like work at all. But there are things I'd like to do. You know, there's a lake to canoe and fish. There's rivers to ford. There's bike trails to explore. All those things that I've, you know, deprived myself of so that I could do what I love, and it's been great. It's fun. I do enjoy it. And I have some great relationships with companies and organizations that I want to continue working with. But it's time to turn the Center for Phlebotomy Education over to some fresh energy. I'll tell you this, that individual, and I'll announce that person when the time is right, will take this company places we could never take it, because that's what new energy does. And so there's a lot of work left to be done, and a lot of work that needs to happen. A lot of changes in the industry need to happen. And so as the Center for Phlebotomy Education transitions to new leadership, I will certainly be involved in that transition. I intend on making it seamless so that everything that you're used to, you can continue to enjoy and appreciate. Speaking of appreciation, the friends I've made, the colleagues that I've gathered to myself as lifelong friends, you've given my professional life meaning. You've made it joyful. You know who you are, and there's so many, too numerous to count. But it has been truly an honor to be of service to all of you. And thank you so much for making the second half of my career so fulfilling. And I only hope that the rest of your career is at least that fulfilling as well. So God bless you, and most of all, God bless my wife, without whom none of this would have ever happened.